And unfortunately, you have to do with my voice without the harmonium. I'm playing it, but nobody can hear it. Brahmananda Parama
Wait. No, guys, I can't hear it.
Kada Kevala Jnanamurti Dandvatita Gagana Sadrisham Tatvama Sayadhi Laksham Ekam Nityam Vimalam Achalam Sarvadi Sakshi Bhuta Bhavatita Triguna Rahitam Sadguru Tam Namami We start with a prayer. Divine Mother, Heavenly Father, friend, beloved God, great gurus, preceptors of all religions, we humbly bow to you all. Thank you for being present during this talk. Thank you for raising all our vibrations. Om Shanti. So, thank you for being present. So, for those who are my regular people, the Kriyabans, I just want to say is we are now going to include everyone in these classes. But what we do in it's not really a class. We basically read from the Gita and we try and understand it and we try and relate it to our everyday lives. Okay, so that uh, what we at Paramahansa Yogananda Institute believe that scriptures are not meant to be put on the shelf to gather dust, but even through the ages, there are some eternal truths which can be applied to our everyday lives. Okay, so as a therapist also, I see that whatever the principles we are teaching our clients or we are treating our clients with are no different from what is there in the Gita. So there is a very, very interesting correlation between modern psychology and the ancient Indian scripture of Gita. And our, endeavor, very difficult word, what we are trying to do is to get the Gita off the shelf and make it relevant, right? So today, for the new people, I will give a very short introduction where we are coming from, and then what we will continue doing through the rest of the talks. What we will do is we will continue reading from this version of the Gita. The Gita has many, many versions. This is the version which we refer to at Ananda Sangha. This is Paramhansa Yogananda's interpretation of the Gita as remembered by his disciple Swami Kriyananda. Frankly, I have read through 2, 3 versions of the Gita, have understood nothing. This is the only one I find very, very simple and easy to understand. Okay. So it's a good thing that we are going to refer to this. And what we do during the classes is that I simply read a paragraph and then I try and relate it to everyday life. And of course, you can always ask questions, you can add your comments, whatever it is. Currently, we are somewhere in page 190, which is fine because this is not a linear book. The wisdom that is contained is circular. So the same thing will keep coming at you from 360-degree angles till something in you shifts. So it doesn't matter where you take up or go off. You will always receive the wisdom. Okay. And whoever is here in this class, now this is an ongoing thing. We will keep doing it every week. You are absolutely free to drop off 1 week, come in again on another, drop off for another 2 weeks, because it is not linear. So whenever you are free, whenever you feel inclined to attend the class, we are very happy to see you, and we will continue reading from where we left off. It's not a linear story. That is the good thing about it. Okay. So Gita, as I suppose all of us know, is the essence of the Vedas, right? The Upanishads are a body of scriptures. The essence of the Upanishads are contained in the Vedas. The essence of the Vedas are contained in the Gita. So all those things are basically capsuled into the Gita in the form of a conversation between Lord Krishna and Arjuna. Lord Krishna here, of course, represents source or the soul qualities. Arjuna over here represents every man. He is like us. He is a person on the spiritual growth path, struggling. He has many questions. Life often makes no sense to him. And so he is asking Lord Krishna all these questions. And in the answer that Krishna gives him comes the age-old wisdom. So the story of the Gita starts during the battle of Kurukshetra. And at the eve of the battle, the Kauravas, which is the evil side, are ranged on one side, that army. The Pandavas, which are the good side, are ranged on the other side. And Arjuna, who is the army commander of the Pandavas or the good side, he suddenly is getting weak-kneed. So he is asking Krishna, his charioteer, just take me between the two armies so that I can see what I am in for on the eve of the battle. And Krishna takes him there. The chariot of Krishna has 5 horses, which is a symbol of our 5 senses. So Krishna is God who is reigning in our 5 senses. And when he takes Arjuna to the middle of the battlefield, and when Arjuna sees the Kauravas ranged on one side and the Pandavas on the other, he is starting to feel very, very nervous. And he is telling Krishna that how can I kill the Kauravas? Because these are my cousins. I can see my grandfather. I can see the teacher who has taught me everything that I do know about warfare. He is on the other side. How am I going to destroy them? And he simply drops his bow and arrow. He sits down on the chariot and he says, I refuse to fight. That is when Krishna starts talking to him why he should get up and fight, right? Now, when we understand, and the entire Gita is about that. And through those questions of Arjuna and Krishna's answer, emerged the deepest wisdom possible, the secret of life, why we are here, what on earth are we doing, how should we conduct our lives so that we can move forward on our spiritual growth path. We have to know that the purpose of our life is only one, and that is to grow spiritually, to evolve to the full potential of us as human beings. What does that mean? Full potential is actually to reach our God self. According to Sanatan Dharma, which is the eternal religion, what is man's ultimate purpose in life is to reconnect to the God self within each of us. God is not somebody outside. God is completely manifested in everything in duality, whether it is evil or good, beautiful or ugly, everywhere, every bit of everything we see and us, we all have the essence of God inside us. And our purpose in life is basically to realize that. That is the meaning of self-realization. Okay. So to recap, for people who have joined today, I will just give a very brief outline. I will now go to the board to show us what we are doing in this world and what is our journey. Okay. Is that visible, Ritu?
Yeah. Shonali, can you put ma'am on spotlight?
From my end, she's already on spotlight from the beginning.
Spotlight everyone. You have that option.
Oh,
And make it spotlight for everyone. Then she will be.
how do we do? How do I do that?
Go to ma'am's box. There, the 3 dots. Na, when you
I have done that already. In my screen, it's already shown spotlight.
एक बार फिर से just try ना, because it's not for everyone. एक बार remove spotlight and do spotlight for everyone.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's start from the beginning. We don't know when beginning is. Say, let us not even go into the year. It is outside time and space, right? So let's assume this is source or God. Okay. Now it is said that God or source is Satchidananda. So what is Satchidananda? Existence, consciousness, bliss, right? So this is the quality of source. Now this existence, consciousness, bliss was apparently absolutely too blissful. And so enlightened masters have told us that God wanted to experience who it was by experiencing what it was not. Okay. So the world was manifested. Why the different worlds? Let us not be under any,
बंद कर देना आवाज नहीं
So there are many worlds. The earth is a very, very tiny little part of the many galaxies and universes. So when God wanted to experience himself, herself, or itself, there needed to be a movement, because this is stillness, this Satchidananda or existence, consciousness, bliss, perfect stillness. So God expended some energy in the form of vibration, and that is the vibration of Om. Behind everything, the fundamental quality of the universe is actually sound. So once this stillness started vibrating with Om, the vibration started moving out from source. As it moved further and further away from source, these are very high vibrations, okay, very fine, very high. As it started to move further and further away from source, the vibrations became very low. And as the vibrations became low, material world started to emerge, right? So we know from solid to liquid to gas, as the vibration rises, it turns into ether. So similarly, as this vibration started to move outwards beyond source, it started getting more and more solid, and it manifested the physical world. When it manifested the physical world, the lower it went, the denser the energies became. So this is lighter energy, this is denser energy. So this dense energy we call evil. So the world of good and bad and relativity started to manifest. Over here, there is perfect oneness. Over here, the world of relativity is beginning. So that in the contrast of dark and light, the contrast makes us understand the true nature. If there is no dark, we don't understand what is light. If there is no good, we don't understand what is bad. And so in that game, that relative game, the particles, the God particles, which have come down as human beings, we are part of that one source. We have manifested. Now we have agreed to play the game of black and white. And in learning to play the game of black and white, we have free choice to choose either darkness or light. And fundamentally, our entire journey is back to source, back to our God self. So over lifetimes, of millions of lifetimes, we are playing this game of good and bad. We have free will to choose. Nobody is controlling it. It is only through experience that we are realizing that bad doesn't feel so good, if you know what I mean. Bad creates more trouble for us than not. So we start moving towards the light. And as we move towards the light, we start understanding the nature of the game. And as we start understanding the nature of the game, we start to step out of the game. We are no longer stuck in the drama. Now, this takes many, many lifetimes. And finally, when we reach the level of a master, we merge back into source. So this whole journey, outward, here and back. So this is what we are playing over the cycle of the yugas. We keep going round and round in this constant rebirth over centuries, okay? So I'll explain the cycle of the yugas. So it's difficult to explain on a 2D linear mode, but just see it as a model of understanding, right? So this is a cycle of the yugas or the time periods in, say, human history. I won't get into the dates. I can send the details later for those more intellectually inclined, but do understand when the energies are nearest to source, this is the golden age or Satya Yuga. This is the age of the ancient sages. And if you want to see it from the Western world's point of view, it is Atlantis and Lemuria and those civilizations where the vibration was very high because it is closest to source. And people would get incarnated, but they would meditate and quickly merge back into source. Now, as the vibrations are moving away from source, we come to the descending cycle of the yugas. From the Satya Yuga, we come to the Treta Yuga. This is the age of telepathy, okay? Where people could just thought communicate. They didn't have to talk. So even then they had, because they are still towards source, even though they are going downwards, they still do have a lot of spiritual powers, but energy is becoming denser and denser. Then comes the Dwapar Yuga or the energy age. Now it is descending, it is going away. Dwapar. Of energy. Here people understood that we are just not physical beings. We also exist on an energy level. Okay? But already the energy is diminishing because we are moving away from source. Right? This would be the silver age. If you see it in the Western way, this would be the copper age. And now comes the iron age or Kali Yuga. This is the age of complete materialism. People do not understand spirituality. Their energies have become very, very heavy. They are only after worldly things like money and name and fame. So the ego is getting bigger and bigger. Here there is no ego. As you move, because we are all one, as you move into ego, the fear, the separateness from source creates the ego. So this is the age of total insecurity, constant hoarding, only interested in money. So this is the Kali Yuga. So we have reached the peaks. Now, in these ages, when the energy is going down, we then need to have saviors. In the Satya Yuga, we don't need any saviors. Every person knows how to take care of themselves. They are connected to source. They don't need a via media. But in this age, we have avatars. We need saviors. So in Treta Yuga, we have Lord Rama. Okay. In Dwapar Yuga, we need Krishna to show mankind the way back to source. In Kali Yuga, we have Christ and Buddha. And Buddha. Now, where are we currently? We are currently in the ascending energy age. We are still very close to the material age. We are in the, what do you say, the conjunction between the ages. This is ascending energy age, ascending Dwapar. Therefore, you see that in this age, people are again becoming interested in spirituality. Even till our parents' generation, they were busy earning their money. Nobody was really interested in spirituality or in energy work. People did not believe in energy healing. But now in my classes, I see people as young as 25, 20-year-old, 19-year-old. They are interested in things like meditation and spirituality because this is the ascending energy age. This is the age of the second coming of Christ. What does second coming of Christ mean? It doesn't mean Christ is going to embody himself and come. It simply means the Christ consciousness or the Krishna consciousness in each one of us at our third eye or spiritual eye will awaken in this age so that people start now connecting to source. They understand why we are here, the true meaning of life, and they are interested to realize their full potential. So after Dwapar, again come ascending Treta, again Satya Yuga. Now masters like Yogananda and our line of masters have decided to step out of the game. They are realized masters, they are avatars. If they want, they can remain here. They say we are not interested in this continuous cycle all the time. So these are enlightened beings who actually have merged with source, but who come down as avatars to help humanity to move forward. Okay, so this is the whole big picture on which the Gita is based. Krishna is trying to explain to Arjuna all these things through all the shlokas. And therefore, what is right action, what is wrong action, how should we live our lives, so on and so forth. I'm trying to go back to my normal view. Yeah. Okay, so on this backdrop, the Gita is what Krishna is telling Arjuna. So the Gita is actually a battle. The Kurukshetra battle is at various levels. It's a battle between good and evil. It's a battle between spirit and matter. It is a battle between the soul and the body. It is a battle between life and death. It is a battle between knowledge and ignorance. It is a battle between health and disease. It is a battle between changelessness and transition. It is a battle between self-control and temptation. It is a battle between discrimination, having the bigger picture, being able to decide, discrimination and the blind mind, just going, reacting versus responding. So it is a battle at many levels. And the battle of Kurukshetra is completely allegorical. It is a battle in our own spine. It is the battle between good and evil in everybody. Because we are in the physical body, we are embodied. We have a big solid ego. The ego is there to show us the contrast between separateness from source and source. The ego keeps us separate from God or source. So ultimately, self-realization really means dropping the ego and merging with source. So the battle of Kurukshetra is the battle in the human spine. Okay. Within us, we have all the apparatus to become enlightened. We have a very, very powerfully developed nervous system and brain, which actually, if we know how to use it, and if we are aware of our energy bodies, we can move towards enlightenment by certain practices like meditation. Okay, so the battle is in the human spine between our good tendencies and our bad tendencies. In the world of relativity that we are in, we all have dark, we all have light within us. And it is up to us that we make our free choices and move towards the light or source. Okay, so what happens is, so say this is the human body. And beyond our physical body, there is an energy body. So on the astral spine or the energy spine, there are energy vortices or chakras. There are 7 main chakras in our body, which is regulating the amount of energy we can channel, which keeps us alive. This is channeling prana or life force, right? So what are we doing if this is the battle? This is the battleground actually. The Kauravas are our negative tendencies. The Pandavas are our positive tendencies. So the Kauravas will always try to bring down the energies towards the feet, towards the lower chakras. What are the Kauravas? They symbolize negative tendencies like the low vibrational energies, primary of which is fear. Fear because separated from source. Fear, blame, shame, I'm not good enough, all these lower emotions. The Pandavas, on the other hand, will try to push the energy upwards. What are the source qualities? It's love, it's compassion, it's openness, it's enthusiasm, it's friendship. All these are the higher qualities. Okay. So the battle is constantly raging within us to keep our energies uplifted towards source, because it is here at the spiritual eye that we can connect to our source. So practices like meditation, why do we do meditation? To keep our energies up here. Whenever you're feeling down or feeling in a horrible mood, or you're beginning to hate someone, feeling frightened of COVID, whatever is happening, you will know that the Kauravas within you are winning. In spite of everything, if you can keep your energies up, you know the Pandavas within you are winning. So the more spiritually ahead in the path that we get, it simply means that we are able to see the bigger picture of life. We don't take the relativity drama, the black and white, good and bad, all that very seriously anymore. We know we are here, these situations will come up. We need to choose what will keep us moving this way. And finally, that is the dropping of the ego. The ego-based energies are, as I said, all fear-based energies. Fear, hatred, guilt, shame, all these are very heavy ego-based energies. Whereas joy, happiness, compassion, calm, all these are source-based energies. So the whole battle is to move towards source over millions of lifetimes. Move forward in one lifetime, we may make a mistake and spiral down in another also. So a meditative practice is very, very useful to keep the energies always in the higher chakras. Okay. That is why Krishna tells Arjuna in the Gita, be thou.
And just pause for a second, sorry. Ma'am, can you unmute yourself, please? I can't hear you.
When did I get muted?
Just now. That's fine.
Okay.
We just lost the 2 seconds back.
Okay.
We can
Fine.
continue.
Is it okay?
Yes, please.
All right. So in the Gita, Krishna tells Arjuna, Arjuna, be thou a yogi, right? So what is a modern day yogi? Now, before or even today, it's often thought, gosh, you're on the spiritual path, now you're no good for anything. You might as well go away into a cave and live. The point is, being a yogi, you can still be in the world and completely do whatever it is you are doing, but be much more happier doing it. You don't have to go into a cave. You don't have to give up anything. You may have to add in your day-to-day routine a little spiritual practice, which ultimately actually enables you to see the big picture. And so you become a responsive individual. You no longer react from your past karmic tendencies. How much time do we have? Okay, 15 minutes. Okay. So, through the Gita, the spiritual director of Ananda, that is Jyotish Ji, he has divided the Gita slokas into 9 sections. These are 9 steps to enlightenment. So what are these 9 gems or Navratnas? The first one is inner conflict. Okay. At the very basic level, people are still not understanding what is good, what is bad. They are still fighting within themselves, they are making mistakes. So there's a huge amount of inner conflict within each one of us, right? The next set of shlokas, they are not so linear, they overlap all the time, but these are the 9 sections he has divided into for us to understand the evolutionary path. So after inner conflict comes the imperishable soul. The inner conflict is when Arjuna is completely stymied. He tells Krishna that, listen, I cannot now start battling with my cousins. That is his biggest conflict in his life. How can I kill people who I have grown up with? Now, allegorically, what Krishna is telling Arjuna is fight against your bad tendencies. If you don't kill the Kauravas, they are going to outnumber you. So you need to be discriminating. What is it that you need to control in yourself? What is it that you need to destroy in yourself? So that is the basis of the Gita, this Arjuna's terrible conflict and Krishna trying to show him the bigger picture. The next Navratna or the next state is the imperishable soul. These are the shlokas where Krishna is explaining to Arjuna the big picture, which I just explained on the board, that we are all part of source energy. We are here only to learn through experience, through the contrast of relativity, what is good, what is bad, and choose our way back up to our own God self. So those are the shlokas, imperishable soul. The next one is once Arjuna understands the big picture of imperishable soul, he actually gets inspired to become discriminating. And the next Navratna is self-offering. What is self-offering? It is if one of us now starts to meditate. We have now understood the value of meditation, and we are consciously engaging in a relationship with soul, okay, our soul nature. We are raising our energies every day through our meditative practice. We are offering ourselves back to source. So the next set of slokas, Arjuna understands the value of self-offering, of knowing that, okay, life has a path. I don't need to keep getting stuck in this, inner conflict of mine. I can move out of it by offering myself and moving towards source. The next set of slokas, according to Jyotishji, is directional development, where Krishna explains to Arjuna that, through lifetimes, we have many qualities, and all our qualities are not at the same level. Say, for example, a person who is a very good person, who is a kind person, may also have a very short temper. So we are a mix of good and bad, right? To greater or lesser extent. Or maybe a very generous person, maybe a very good person, maybe very devoted to God, but has some addiction. You can be a smoker, you can be a drinker. These are the ego things, which doesn't mean that you are not spiritual. It simply means that all aspects of yourself are not yet at that absolute apex level. You would become a master if that happened. But most of us are in some ways up and down in certain aspects. So that is directional development. The point is, Krishna is telling Arjuna, as long as you are making the right effort now towards source, that is good, right? We are not telling you yoga, in fact, is not about perfection. Yoga is about wholeness. Yoga is understanding that we have dark, we have light within us, can we look at both the qualities that we have without judgment, without self-blame, understanding we are all human, having compassion first for ourselves and then for others, and then starting to work with what is already there. So yoga is about wholeness, to be able to look at my light side, to be able to look at my dark side, and to see, okay, I see that I can improve here, and then move from where I am towards the next step. So that is directional development. Now, then comes the huge topic of karma. So that I will not even try and go into it. As we go through the shlokas every day, it will, as we keep discussing and moving through the shlokas, it will become slowly clearer and clearer what exactly is karmic action, and how to avoid karmic action. Because karmic action, it's not a punishment, it is a learning mechanism. It is, say, karma is like that hot stove which is sitting there, and your mother has told you as a 3-year-old, do not touch that hot stove. Now you are not listening. Mother is like God. You say, I'll touch it anyway. What can happen? Now you've touched the hot stove, you've got burnt. So you got your karma. That's the karmic lesson. Next time you will not touch it, right? So that in essence is karma. It is just a learning mechanism. Unfortunately, most people, when they don't have the big picture, they learn only through solid kicks on the backside, right? Unless we get burned, we refuse to learn. But as we move forward on our spiritual growth path, we start to recognize patterns much ahead of time, and we can smartly bypass that. So then we reach the next set of slokas, which is dharma. What is dharmic action? How do we make sure at every point we are behaving in a dharmic manner, right? So those dharma will also come up. So the best way actually is to keep reading this book. And as we come across each sloka, to try and understand what it is saying. I can give you lectures pura on karmic, 3 days on karma, 3 days on dharma, but we are trying to read the Gita and trying to bring the book off the shelf and into our daily lives, okay? Now, after that, after you understand what is dharma or, dharmic action, then comes the inner knowing, the intuition, the third eye starts opening, and you go beyond the intellect into intuition, into a knowing and a wisdom of what is right and what is wrong. After this, when you really become intuitive, you can channel messages from the masters. The moment you see a situation, you know exactly what it means and why you should do something or not do something. Then comes wisdom, or sorry, after wisdom, after the inner knowing, then comes devotion. Devotion or faith grows once we are fairly ahead on the evolutionary ladder. True devotion, we are of course taught from a young age, please light the lamp in front of the god, do your namaste before you leave the house, but that is not devotion. That is just some mechanical practice we have learned. But to develop a true inner communion with God, to understand the true nature of the divine romance, the true nature of the Radha Krishna love affair. What is that love affair? What is it the allegory of? of the devotee with God. When that devotion, without the devotion, no matter how many yogic practice, we may stand on our heads, we may meditate for 10 hours a day, we may run away into a cave, without that intimate relationship with God, spiritual growth is not possible. So what happens when we are meditating all these practices? It helps us to open the heart chakra. So the point of everything is, because the true nature of God is Satchidananda, there is a very powerful feeling quality. If we don't develop our hearts and only our intuition, we are not going to be able to reach God. So devotion is a very, very, what would I say? It is everybody's intimate relationship with God. After devotion can come self-realization, where you realize that you are God. The person or the being or the energy that you're loving is none other than you. And it is then that you merge with source. So this is how actually the shlokas move through the Gita. But this is just for our understanding that these are the several stages to self-realization. We cannot very linearly block it saying, oh, okay, shloka 1 to 25 is about inner conflict, then 25 to 45 is, no, we can't do that, because inner conflict, because of directional development, some parts of Arjuna are still lower down. Some parts he can understand, some parts he can't. So all of them are moving parallelly, but ultimately towards self-realization. So this is what the Gita in short contains. And today I won't go into reading the book. I'll do that next time. I think it's 5 o'clock, right? Yeah. So if anybody has any questions, you can please ask. Otherwise, I will see you next week. Any questions?
Oh, if
Any
anybody
comments?
wants to ask a question, you can just unmute yourself, please.
Yeah. Who's asking a question? I can't hear.
I don't think anyone's asking, ma'am.
Okay, so fine. If there are no questions, great. Do come back next week. If you don't want to drop, come back the week after next, but we will keep talking about this and we will keep reading. Please hop in and off as you please. So Kriyabans will remain. We will do a long meditation, but for the others, I will end the session with a prayer. Okay. Divine Mother, thou art omnipresent. Thou art in all thy children. Manifest thy healing power in all bodies, minds, and souls. Now we rub our hands together and we'll send the healing energy forward into the world. Send it to anyone in particular if you feel. Otherwise, in general, to raise the vibrational frequency of the earth. And chant Om with me 3 times as you send out the healing energy. Om. Om. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. So see you next week. Kriyabans, please remain